All right. So first thing off the bat is that I started a Substack, and I mentioned this in last week's video, but I would invite all of you to join. It is free. There are paid tiers. You don't have to pay anything. As of right now, everything I post is going out to everybody. At some point, there'll be certain things that paid members will get that the free members won't, but it won't be anything. I'm not going to ever exclude people from my thoughts or ideas. The actual post will always be free to anybody. The paid tiers are, if you want to do monthly, it's $7.99. If you want to do annually, it's $79.99, and then if you want to be a founding member, that's $199.99 paid one time for the year. Basically, it's just for people who want to support. Don't feel obligated. I've also started doing paid consultations. And my aim with this was to get to a place where I could do more content creation and slow down my regular law practice. And I want to get to a place where I'm only taking cases that I actually think are cases I could use to make a difference. So I'll take cases if I especially believe in the cause, and I'll take cases if I think there's a chance that I could use it to overturn some bad precedent like Pennsylvania versus Mims or Terry versus Ohio or whatever. So the more I'm able to rely more on the content side of things, the more targeted and specific I can be in relationship to what I take in my regular law practice. And so as such, I've started to do paid consultations. So if you're interested in that, if you want a professional evaluation on your case and you would like somebody to look at it, then just shoot me an email, james@southerndrawlaw.com. Let me know if you're a paid member when you reach out to me, because I do offer paid members of Substack a discount on the services. You're still able to contribute via Venmo and PayPal if you'd like to, and those are the only announcements that I have for today. So Phoenix PD, y'all remember the Tyron McAlpin beating, the deaf man with cerebral palsy that was just about killed by Phoenix Police Department because he didn't understand that, it was his obligation to immediately bend the knee and worship the thin blue line flag as soon as they jumped out. They issued a press release saying that they had suspended 3 officers in relationship to this, but they issued the press release and they suspended them for 24 hours unpaid. I will tell you that when I was a police officer, we worked 12-hour shifts. We only worked 14 days a month. So like you were on, say, you'd work Monday and Tuesday and you'd be off Wednesday and Thursday, and then you would work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then the next week you were off Monday, Tuesday, you worked Wednesday, Thursday, and then you were off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you wanted to take a 7-day vacation, you take it in your short week, you lose 24 hours vacation, and you get the same amount of money that you would have gotten had you been at work. And you also got built-in overtime for the long week. So the long week where you had 48 hours one week, and then you had 36 on your next, but your total pay had 8 hours of overtime built into it from your long week. So if you took your vacation on your short week, you could still basically make the same amount of money. These guys are going to lose pay, or a 24-hour period. It will absolutely have no impact whatsoever. And I genuinely believe that it would have been less insulting for them to just say they stood behind the officers and they weren't going to do anything, because I absolutely think it's a joke. So Eric says, I'm black-pilled on the judicial system. It's pay to play and the working class gets screwed. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's actually, well, it is on some level pay to play. There's no question, because you can't even file something without paying. I mean, hell, I did a plea for a guy the other day who had, I don't know, some amount of methamphetamine on him. It was a good search. It was in fact, he volunteered it. Bad idea. But meth in Tennessee has a 30-day mandatory jail sentence. So if you can plead it to something else, and what they end up doing is I ended up getting a plea for possession of drug paraphernalia. The court costs alone on possession of drug paraphernalia in my county was $1,400. The court costs and the fine. Yeah, I don't disagree with you about the pay to play thing. I mean, it is. That's true. You don't have to have a lawyer to be in the system. It's just that it's easy to dismiss you because you don't know what to do procedurally, so they just kick you out. You're not going to get a disagreement from me on like how bad. Like I think the criminal justice system is a joke. That said, it's what we have, and we're sort of all forced to either do what our friend here said, which is stay out of it completely and just, or pay to play. So Scott says, what are your thoughts on the sovereign national movement? I get the impression that they're strict to the Constitution. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I assume by that you mean the guys that are traveling instead of driving, the guys that have a plate on the back of their car that say private automobile that stuff. What I've found is a lot of times people fall into that. I actually prosecuted somebody who was from that sovereign national movement, and my experience with him, which he was, I really felt bad for this guy. He was a nice guy, but he was just very, very confused about what his rights were under the law. And what he did was, there was a website out there that took money from people to give them a bunch of garbage documents to file. And basically what happens is, I've never seen a person from that sort of point of view or that mindset ever prevail in court for any reason other than they were just too much of a pain in the butt to deal with. And so the courts just did whatever they could do to get rid of them. My experience is that they fall into this sovereign national thing because they're tired of, maybe they don't like the regulatory aspects of things. They're sick of doing the registration stuff. They're sick of doing, I don't think it's a genuinely held belief. Some of them it is. Some of them it is. And that's okay. But I think by and large, my experience has been that it's not a genuinely held belief. It's a way to try to avoid accountability for not wanting to do what everybody else does. I shouldn't say what you're supposed to do. People, you can do whatever you want to do. That's fine. I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives. I will tell you what the legal consequences will be depending on what you do. And Tennessee transparency is correct. Police are the only true sovereign citizens. Okay, so Philbin Creek Phil says, you mentioned competing with a civil rights lawyer when he visited that town. Have you thought about taking up the banjo or guitar to play at the end of your videos? Haha. This is the truth. I'm a super fan of John Bryan. I think he's got an incredible channel. I've been watching him since he had like 2,000 subscribers. And I'll probably have a bigger party than he does whenever he hits 1 million, because I just think it's an incredible thing to take a regular guy, good old boy from West Virginia, and throw him on the internet. And the biggest thing that I think is valuable about what John does and about what I hope to have the opportunity to do myself is the impact you can have. Because all it takes is for John Bryan to be notified of your existence, and you are instantly going to have a puckered asshole, because people are going to start calling. People are going to start asking questions that you're not prepared to answer. All he's got to do is post a video and talk about your case. If he does that, I'm not saying that because John would probably, he seems like, I've never met him, never talked to him. I reached out before I first started, and I think he was just busy and I wasn't able to connect with him. I'm not even sure if he knows that I did reach out, but I did. And then after a little while, what happened was I decided that I didn't want to, I was afraid that somebody would see it as me trying to grift or ride on somebody's coattails to try to build my thing. And so what I thought was, I'm just going to build it. I'm going to build it myself. I'm not going to ask for any help. And I've had some opportunities to collaborate with some bigger creators, and I've just never wanted to feel like I was using someone else's clout to get where I wanted to get. And so after I started making content, I never reached out and tried to connect with John again. I would like to collaborate with him, but I'm just one of these people, I just don't like asking for help, and I don't want him to see it as me trying to use him for something. But that being said, it really is kind of like when John Bryan does a video on your situation, it's kind of like having Benjamin Crump show up to talk about your civil rights case. It's almost a guaranteed win, and people, they're going to start scrambling like roaches when you turn the lights on. But no, the truth is I can't compete with John, at least not at this point, and I wouldn't try to. I think we do sort of similar things and different things, but I do play the guitar, not very well, and I sing. I want to see John Bryan sing. Do you sing, John Bryan? If so, bring it. Bring it. You've got a better beard. You play the banjo. I don't know. We can talk about the differences, but bring it. If you think you can't outsing me, I guarantee it. You can't outsing me. You can't touch me. There's no way. Lost 404. Can you explain how the ghost police cars are legal? Doesn't the statute say clearly contrasting colors? Which statute are you referring to? Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean there isn't a statute. I'm just not familiar with any statute that says police cars have to be marked. Let's ask AI. Do police cars have to be marked in Tennessee? The short answer would be it's going to depend on where you are. All right. Well, Nashville.gov wrote, unmarked vehicles have been used by Nashville Metro for 20 years. Although state law allows the use of blue or the combination of blue and red for law enforcement vehicles, Nashville PD only uses blue. I am not familiar with any statute that requires that police. I'm not familiar with a statute that requires police cars be marked. It's going to depend on the state. All right. Who's got more questions? I'm going to scroll back a little bit. I took that. So the Christmas song post, I was like, oh God, is he really going to sing? If you want to see me sing, you got to go join Substack. Maybe I'll do it there at one point. But I did audition for American Idol. I have slept in a Holiday Inn. And the truth is that any time that I do anything other, I'm not joking about this. Anytime that I do anything other than talk shit about the police, I get negative feedback from the people in my audience. It's not everybody. By and large, it's always positive. Like my approval rate on the ups versus downs is like 98.5% or 99%. But like I had somebody yesterday who's been a supporter of my channel for a long time, and I don't know what their issue was with the cops video, but they were just like, I know this is just one side of your content, but I really just don't like this. And the first video that I did on the cop show, which by the way, they did a copyright strike on me, which is going to fail miserably for them, but they didn't do a copyright strike. They did a copyright claim, which is different, and it gives me an opportunity to dispute. And this is what I said, look, if as a lawyer, a practicing licensed attorney explaining the nuance in the laws and how this interaction went, if that's not fair use, there's no such thing as fair use. So, take your best shot. So Laws did provide this is a Georgia code from what I understand, except as provided in subsection B of this code, any motor vehicle which is used as on official business by any person authorized to make arrests for traffic violation in the state shall be of distinctly marked on each side and the back with the name of the agency responsible in letters not less than 4 inches. There you go. So they are in compliance with, unless there's more to it, 404. Unless there's more to it, then they are distinctly marked. It doesn't say they have to be contrasting. Obviously, that's an attempt to get around the law, right? Tennessee tried to make unmarked cars unlawful in 2023. Hey, let me talk to you about the stupid nonsense that Tennessee's doing right now. Did you guys hear about the bill that they just passed, or that the bill that went to the governor's desk to give police in Tennessee more immunity? It's not too much of a surprise given our current stance. David says, back in 2022, I went to see a lawyer, and this lawyer was so rude with foul language at me with no respect. Have you ever done that to one of your clients as a lawyer to them? No, what I do with here's what I offer to my clients is that I am real with them. So I have said things to my clients that they don't like or they don't want to hear, but I think that's your duty, just to tell them the truth. But no, I wouldn't sit there and cuss somebody. Now, you'll see some stuff, you lose some tone in text, and there'll be times that I'll say stuff in the comments, and I'll be lazy, I guess, about the way that I punctuate it or the way that I deliver it, and sometimes it'll come off that way, but it's not intentional. Let's see here. So Dave says Governor Bill Lee is a slow-minded disgrace to the state. I actually don't think that so there were some things that I learned about Governor Lee when I was at the district attorney's office that surprised me, and I actually don't think Bill Lee he's more centric than you would realize. For instance, Bill Lee had like a personal experience with a person who really had a positive impact on his life, and he was a convicted felon, and the guy got out of prison and reformed his life. And Governor Lee is very oriented towards rehabilitation and lowering recidivism, and he is not a put everybody in prison type of person. He's very much left-leaning when it comes to criminal justice reform, but I don't think Governor Lee is the issue in this particular case. I think it's the law and order loving Tennessee Republicans that are the issue. But just want to pull that up. Let me see if I can find it. The Tennessee immunity bill. So WBR posted Republican bill giving Tennessee police officers immunity from lawsuits involving those convicted of obstructing justice passes the legislature. And so it really, in typical politician fashion, they're spending their energy fixing a problem that doesn't exist, because basically what it does is it says that it gives police officers who cause property damage or personal injury during the officer's official duties immunity from civil liability if the person suing engaged in conduct that resulted in the person being convicted of obstruction of justice. So basically, it's like in those very rare cases, like where you would be convicted of obstructing justice, you would be barred from suing the police officer, or that they would get immunity. But here's why it doesn't really matter, because one, you can still sue somebody federally, and that you still have your federal qualified immunity hurdle that you have to go over. And generally, being convicted of the thing you were arrested for is a bar to sue for malicious prosecution or unlawful arrest, because if it was unlawful and it lacked probable cause, you wouldn't have been convicted for it. So they're solving a problem that doesn't really exist. And then the other thing is, it's less than 10% of the time, even in cases where the police officer is the only remaining outstanding defendant, that the jurisdiction still indemnifies them and they don't have to pay anyway. Tennessee Transparency says, what's your opinion on the useless Judicial Misconduct Board and the Board of Professional Responsibility for Attorneys in Tennessee? I find them corrupt and useless. I don't have an opinion on that. I don't know what specifically you're referring to. I think the Board of Professional... Here, this is what I know, and I don't know, 6 more immunity. Are they usually federal guidelines? Are they going with quasi or judicial type immunity or what? I hadn't heard Tennessee was doing that, so I'm curious. Some states are doing the opposite. Yeah, and that's the other thing. You got states like New Mexico and Colorado that have removed qualified immunity on a state level. I actually think it's just pandering. That's what it is, because it really doesn't have any effect. Most of those suits are 1983 suits in federal court, and your lack of qualified immunity on the state level wouldn't have any bearing on that. Here's what I know, Tennessee Transparency. If for example, you want to make a lawyer uncomfortable, then the way to do that is to file a board complaint. Now, I don't take that lightly. It's a very serious thing. I don't think people should do it frivolously, but lawyers will immediately become available to answer the board when they, and if they don't, the board, so if the board sends you, so they're kind of like the DMV, man. If they send you something that you've been complained on, or you owe an explanation to the board for something and you don't answer them, they suspend your license. And so then, Spike, you're probably not wrong. So obstruction of justice will be the number one law enforced in Tennessee. That's the danger of this sort of thing, is that whenever you tell any group of people, it doesn't matter whether it's police officers or whatever, any group of people, if you make it, harder for somebody to sue them, even if there's no actual application, you're still going to incentivize them to care less about whether they get sued. And I don't know, Six Oaks, you might be able to chime in on this. What is your opinion on police officers change their tune in depositions? It's just that the truth is most people just don't follow up. Most people, and I don't care if it's diet, exercise, your January New Year's resolution. I don't think it matters. I think people generally don't do what they say they're going to do. And I think that most people don't take it seriously when they're threatened with a lawsuit. So we were talking about the Phoenix PD thing, and they issued this joke suspension, and one of the things in the letter, it said, I think I'm going to do a video on it. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But what they said was in the letter was that 2 of the officers had to undergo de-escalation training. And that got me to thinking, maybe de-escalation is not the issue. And hear me out. It's not that it's not the issue. It's just that the question that I have is, are we treating the symptom or are we treating the underlying systemic issue? Because what I remember about my police experience and training was that nobody ever had a conversation with me or taught me any training when it comes to use of force that dealt with reasonableness and proportionality. All that we were taught was that if this person is doing this level of force, you're allowed to go one level of force above them. And they explained it to us on a continuum. And down here on the low end of the continuum, officer presence is your first use of force in a uniform, right? Command presence is what they call it. And then way up here on the other end of the use of force continuum is deadly force. And along the way, you've got things like verbal commands, and you got soft empty hand controls, and then you got hard empty hand controls, and then you have things like, hard empty hand controls will be the same level of force, at least when I was a police officer, of tasers, pepper spray. That's what my understanding of it was. And then you can escalate up to deadly force. And so the only thing I was ever taught was that you're allowed to go one level up. So if this person's using active resistance, you can use passive resistance. You can use, say, soft. This is not exactly accurate. I'm just using an example. If it's passive resistance, maybe you can use like soft empty hand controls to barely overcome the passive resistance. If it's active resistance, you can escalate up to, hard empty hand controls and maybe strikes for that. But nobody ever said I think it should be tied to decision making and reasonableness and the scope of what you're trying to do. If you're there for a public intoxication, or you're there for, or you've stopped somebody for a stop sign violation, or like in the situation that John Bryan covered the other day when he did his update to the Laughing Guy lawsuit, and that officer lost qualified immunity. What was the thing he was there for? I mean, he was there for, one, an illegal purpose, because he originally stopped the guy for flashing his lights to warn other drivers that police were there, which is not an offense, right? And then, so that's where your like sort of mission and the thing you're allowed to enforce starts. And then it moved on to the guy didn't sign his registration card, which is, it really is an arrestable offense in West Virginia. I lived there. It's stupid, but that's what it is. And, you know, the bottom line is that you don't teach police officers how to think from a systems perspective. And because of that, all they learn is cause and effect relationships. They don't think about the whole. They don't think about they know the buzzwords, basically de-escalation, totality of the circumstances. They understand buzzwords, but they don't necessarily understand how those integrate to the totality of the circumstances. And then we ask them to like try to figure this stuff out. And or basically we do things like, you know, send them to de-escalation training, and that all that teaches them is that, like, hey, get them to calm down. Well, that always works, right? You ever argued with your wife? Tell her to calm down. See how that goes. Show up with a guy that's bipolar off his medication or has a borderline personality disorder and thinks you're the FBI there to, or schizophrenic and thinks you're the FBI there to, you know, you've been wiretapping his telephone calls for a month and you're there to talk to him. Bro, that's, you know, de-escalation is not going to work. You have to learn what your authority comes from and what you're allowed to do. I wanted to mention to you that there was a book that I read when I first started my education in criminal justice called Stepping in Holes, WHOLES, and it changed my life. I was probably 23 years old, 22, 23 years old, and it helped me understand how to think of things from a, you know, kind of like if you have a fever, that's a symptom. It's not, it's a symptom of an underlying infection, right? So you treat the fever with ibuprofen, but you treat the symptom with antibiotics, right? Because it's an infection, and the fever is in response to the thing that's happening in your body. And so that's the difference between a cause and effect relationship and a systems approach to understanding how things work in a whole. And so the book is called Stepping in Holes. It's not printed anymore. The only way you can find it is like a used copy, but it's like a 110-page book. It's awesome. It's a great way to sort of work your way through thinking in terms of systems, as opposed to, you know, this person did this, so I'm going to do this back. And my concern with the use of force continuum is that it's cause and effect relationship. If this person's doing this, I'm allowed to do this. And, you know, that what that does is it creates two different rooms. Let's say you're in this room and their level of force that they're offering is passive resistance. So they're at the ceiling of passive resistance. You are at the floor of, say, soft empty hand controls, but you can go as hard as you can to the ceiling of soft empty hand controls and accidentally bust through that, and as they come up, you come up, so you're always a level above them, and before you know it, before long, you're in a deadly force situation, but only because it's all they've taught you is cause and effect. They do this, you do this, you're allowed to do this much to bring it down, not, you know, anything along the way to understand the sort of proportionality and reasonableness that Graham versus Connor asks you to look at. You know, they want you to look in the grand scheme of things as to what in the world is going on. Are we enforcing a unsigned registration card and beating the brakes off this guy over it? I mean, come on, man. So here we go. Brian says main buzzword they learn is officer safety. Yeah, the only thing I would probably disagree with your categorization of officer safety as a buzzword. I do agree with you that officer safety seems to be. No, I don't disagree with you. I think that, and the reason I say that is I actually think that officer safety is a real thing. I just don't think they're taught to understand. For instance, they're going to use officer safety as a buzzword, but I don't think that's what it is. So I agree with you that they are using officer safety as a buzzword without having a complete understanding of what it actually means to be cognizant of officer safety. For instance, you'll see them doing things like, you know, having their whole body in front of the post of the window That's a bad officer safety thing. Like in the video that John Bryan just posted about his guy that was laughing that got arrested, you notice that that police officer stuck that guy leaning out into the, or standing almost head first into the traffic lane and was between those two cruisers. That's a terrible idea. If somebody hits that cruiser from behind, that's why police officers angle their cruisers. So when you pull up to somebody and they're straight like this, you're supposed to angle your cruiser to where if traffic comes in, they hit your cruiser and that causes it to go sideways into the vehicle that you stopped, so that it's the safest potential collision that can happen. But these police officers, they stand and have conversations with people between cars. They're just asking to be impaled. They don't do anything that actually has an impact on officer safety. They do, now that I've thought about what you're saying, they do use officer safety as a buzzword more than an actual thing that they're concerned about. So I agree, actually, after I've worked my way through it. It's interesting. Somebody made some comments about my video that I put out last week about the transparency and the $1,300 bill on the body cams that they tried to charge this girl that got arrested for disorderly conduct in Arizona. I don't remember where it was, Mesa maybe. But no, it wasn't Mesa. It wasn't Mesa, but it was another department. And somebody drew my attention to the fact that, because I made the comment that the police were taking the approach that they are responsible for the protection of somebody's privacy in the video, and that's the excuse they use to try to blur out videos, or maybe they'll redact them. And so their whole approach is to suggest, maybe this is something that needs to be sued over. Their whole approach is to suggest that, well, we have to charge by the hour to review these videos, but we have to make sure that, we don't do A, B, C, or D. And then several people put in a comment that was right on point, which is that, but wait, they constantly rely on the fact that the Supreme Court has ruled that they don't have any duty to protect the public. So yeah, if they don't have any duty to protect the public, why would they have a duty to protect somebody's privacy who's out in public? So I think that would be a good point to make if somebody ever sued them over the transparency issue. Ray says, I think every commissioned officer and every training academy should be stressed the Constitution, and in services should have to study over your content over 4 hours. Hey, I appreciate that. You know, what I found disheartening, because my original aim was to just get with these, and I went to that Gracie survival tactics school in hopes that my local departments and the local leadership would implement that. And I found absolutely no interest in that. And that, I don't think these guys are interested in changing. I really believe that it starts at the top. It teaches these people that everything is cause and effect related. There's no sort of systems thinking to anything. It's okay, the news media is squawking about this, we need to address this particular thing. Not, let's treat the underlying infection. Nope, let's throw ibuprofen at this fever right here and move on. And that's it. They don't want to deal with anything on a systemic level. It's just whatever I have to deal with, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's pretty much it. So I don't know what to do about that. You know, what I've found is that they are not interested. Leadership is not interested in learning how to correct these issues. So I really think it has to do with it's just like anything else. It's the people in power. If you can't get them to buy in and you can't persuade them that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, then you're never going to get anywhere. Do police departments reject applicants if they score too high on entrance exams? There is a case called, I think it's Jordan versus New London, that talks about that. It's a really interesting read, and I actually didn't even know about it, and I actually didn't even get it. That's how dumb I am. I didn't even get it when somebody brought it to my attention. I'm like, what's that have to do with it? I'm like, what's that have to do with anything? Well, what it has to do with it is that this guy sued the police department because he wouldn't give him a job, and they essentially said he scored too high on the exam, and they countersued, or they won, they prevailed, and the court said that they have the right to set whatever parameters they want for the type of police officers. And the reason they don't want super smart people is because super smart people are generally less likely to blindly follow orders. Free thinkers are more, they question more things, and they don't make very good subordinates. And if you're going to run a police department, you need people that are going to be good subordinates. And that is the issue. If you get people who are too smart, they're going to be smarter than the person that's trying to lead them, and they're going to question everything. Nobody in a paramilitary organization wants to be questioned. And that's the reason that you don't have, 130, 140 IQ people being routinely hired as police officers. All right, guys. Well, we're at about an hour. I would like to remind you again that I have started a Substack community. Please head over and join. It's free. You can pay if you like. We have paid tiers, and there's a landing page attached to the description of this video where you will be able to learn everything you need to know about that. Offering paid consultation services in addition to the Substack. If you're interested in that, you can always still support if you'd like to with Venmo and PayPal. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on this live stream. Appreciate you guys sticking it out. Hope you guys have a good rest of your weekend. Thank you for hanging out with me, and we will see you next week.